The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador David Kane stepped through the entrance and immediately felt the weight of 10,000 eyes upon him. The chamber stretched upward into darkness, its curved walls lined with viewing platforms that held representatives from species humanity had never dreamed could exist. Floating jellyfish-like beings pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Crystalline entities reflected rainbow light from their faceted bodies. Massive insectoid creatures clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns that might have been language. Some aliens wore mechanical suits that hissed and whirred with each movement, while others existed as pure energy contained within shimmering force fields. David walked steadily toward the center platform, his simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the exotic forms surrounding him. Behind him, the doors sealed shut with finality that echoed through the vast space. There would be no leaving until the council decided his fate. High above, on the central throne that dominated the chamber, sat High Chancellor Vrax. The ancient being resembled a cross between a spider and a tree, with multiple arms that ended in delicate manipulator tendrils. Its voice, when it spoke, resonated through hidden speakers with the authority of someone who had ruled civilizations for longer than humanity had existed. "Human," Vrax declared, each word carrying across the chamber like a judgment. "You stand before the Galactic Council accused of violating the Primitive Species Protection Act. Your world has developed faster than light travel without authorization. You have contacted other civilizations without proper clearance. Most seriously, you have claimed to possess knowledge that threatens galactic security." David remained motionless in the center circle, his hands clasped behind his back. The gravity generators in the chamber had been adjusted to accommodate hundreds of different alien physiologies, making him feel slightly lighter than normal. It was a reminder that this was not his world, not his domain. Here, humanity was the outsider. "Furthermore," Vrax continued, "you have requested an emergency session to discuss what you call an existential threat to all galactic life. This council has maintained peace and prosperity for 50 million years. We find your claims presumptuous." A wave of clicking, buzzing, and harmonic vibrations swept through the chamber as hundreds of alien species expressed their agreement. To them, humanity was a curiosity at best and annoyance at worst. A young species that had barely learned to leave its home star system was now claiming to understand threats that advanced civilizations had never encountered. David finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Honored Chancellor, respected representatives, I understand your skepticism. Humanity is indeed young compared to your great civilizations, but sometimes fresh perspectives can see what familiarity has made invisible." "Speak your warning then," Vrax commanded. "But know that wasting this council's time carries severe penalties for primitive species." David activated a small device at his wrist. Holographic displays materialized above the center platform, showing data streams and mathematical equations that made several alien representatives lean forward with interest. The information was complex, but the implications were terrifyingly simple. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive gravitational disturbances beyond the galactic rim," David explained. "Something is systematically destroying star systems in a pattern that suggests intelligence and purpose. Based on our calculations, this force will reach inhabited galactic space within 2 years." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Translator systems struggled to keep up with the multiple languages being spoken simultaneously. Some species demanded proof. Others questioned human sensor technology. A few simply laughed at the audacity of the claim. "Impossible," declared War Prime Catherine, a hulking reptilian being whose species commanded one of the largest military fleets in the galaxy. "Our defense networks monitor everything beyond the rim. No threat exists there." David's expression remained calm. "With respect, War Prime, your monitoring focuses on technological signatures that advanced civilizations would recognize. This threat operates on principles that your sensors weren't designed to detect." "And human sensors were?" The question came from Science Director Yalith, a floating being of pure energy who spoke through harmonic frequencies. "Human sensors were designed by a species that has spent its entire existence assuming everything was trying to kill it," David replied. "We look for patterns of destruction because destruction is what we know best." Chancellor Vrax leaned forward on his throne, multiple eyes focusing on the human ambassador. You claim superior detection capabilities to civilizations that have mastered space travel for millions of years? I claim different detection capabilities, David corrected. Your species developed in safety, under the protection of established galactic order. Humanity developed in isolation under constant threat. We've had to become very good at recognizing danger because failing to do so meant extinction. The holographic displays updated, showing detailed analysis of the approaching threat. The destruction pattern was methodical, efficient, and absolutely terrifying in its scope. Entire solar systems were being consumed, their matter converted into something that continued the advancement toward inhabited space. Even if we accepted your claims, Science Director Yaleth pulsed with skeptical colors. What response could primitive humans possibly suggest? David smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. We're not here to suggest a response, Director. We're here to inform you of the one we've already implemented. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of life support systems seemed to pause as the implications of his words sank in. What do you mean? Chancellor Vrax demanded. Humanity tried diplomatic channels first, David explained. We sent warnings through proper channels 6 months ago. They were dismissed as the fantasies of a primitive species. We requested emergency meetings. They were denied. We offered to share our sensor data. It was rejected as technologically impossible. He gestured toward the displays still showing the advancing threat. So we stopped asking for permission and started preparing for war. War Prime Kethrin rose from his platform, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. No primitive species possesses military capabilities sufficient to threaten forces that can destroy star systems. You're absolutely right, David agreed. No primitive species does. Fortunately, humanity stopped being primitive the moment we realized we were alone in this fight. The lights in the chamber suddenly dimmed as new information appeared on the displays. Long-range sensor feeds from the galactic rim showed impossible signatures. Human ships engaged in combat with the very entities the Council claimed didn't exist. The vessels were unlike anything in galactic databases. Their design principles clearly derived from a completely different understanding of warfare. Impossible, breathed Science Director Yaleth. Highly improbable, David corrected, but not impossible. Humanity has a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you ignore our warnings and leave us to face extinction alone, we innovate accordingly. Chancellor Vrax's multiple eyes focused on the human with new intensity. What have you done? David's smile became genuinely warm for the first time. We've prepared to save a galaxy that refuses to save itself. The question now is whether you'll cooperate with a species that's actually fighting to protect you, or continue pretending the threat doesn't exist until it arrives at your doorstep. The chamber remained silent as the full magnitude of humanity's position became clear. They weren't here as supplicants begging for help. They were here as the only force standing between galactic civilization and complete annihilation. The warning had been delivered. Now the real reckoning would begin. The emergency session had stretched through 3 galactic standard days, and the council chamber buzzed with desperate energy. Representatives who had spent millennia in comfortable debates about trade routes and territorial boundaries now faced reports of systematic destruction approaching their core worlds. High Chancellor, Vrax hunched over the central command console, his multiple arms manipulating holographic displays that showed the advancing devastation. Each update brought worse news. The Outer Rim colonies had gone silent. Survey fleets sent to investigate simply vanished. The defensive stations that had protected galactic civilization for eons were being swept aside like debris. The Nexus defense grid reports complete failure, announced War Prime Kethrin, his reptilian features showing stress fractures that hadn't been there days earlier. Whatever destroyed it left no wreckage, no energy signatures, nothing. The stations simply stopped existing. Ambassador David Kane stood in the same central circle where he had delivered humanity's warning. Unlike the increasingly frantic aliens surrounding him, he appeared calm, almost serene. His posture suggested someone waiting for an expected outcome rather than witnessing an unfolding disaster. Human, Chancellor Vrax called out, his voice carrying notes of desperation that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Your species claims to be fighting this threat. What intelligence can you provide? David activated his risk communicator. New data streams appeared on the chamber's displays. showing sensor readings unlike anything in galactic databases. The information was detailed, precise, and terrifyingly comprehensive. "The entities are machines," David explained, his voice cutting through the chamber's chaos. "But not machines as you understand them. They're post-biological civilizations that have transcended their original forms. They consume matter at the molecular level and convert it into more of themselves." Science Director Yalith pulsed with rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "How do you possess such detailed analysis?" "Our most advanced sensors cannot penetrate their operational signatures." "Because our sensors weren't designed to detect known threats," David replied. "They were designed to detect unknown ones. Humanity assumes everything is hostile until proven otherwise." The displays updated again, showing tactical information that made the assembled aliens recoil in shock. Human vessels were not only engaging the entities but actually winning individual battles. The ship designs violated every principle of galactic engineering, their configurations suggesting a completely different approach to space warfare. "Your fleet movements," War Prime Catherine observed, "studying the tactical readouts with professional interest. They're operating on mathematical principles we don't recognize." "Game theory," David said simply. "Every human engagement assumes the enemy will adapt, evolve, and learn from each encounter. We plan for opponents who become stronger with every battle." Chancellor Vrax leaned forward on his throne. "And do they become stronger?" "Of course," David answered with unsettling calmness. "They've destroyed 73 of our ships in the past week. Each loss taught them new methods of assault, new defensive patterns to counter. They're extremely intelligent." The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of overtaxed computer systems. Finally, Science Director Yalith spoke in frequencies barely above a whisper. "If they're learning from your losses, how can you possibly win?" David smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was an expression of genuine satisfaction rather than diplomatic courtesy. "Because we expected them to learn. Human military doctrine assumes enemy adaptation. We plan battles not just to win, but to teach our opponents the wrong lessons." New tactical data appeared on the displays. The human ships that had been destroyed were shown in detail, their design principles clearly different from the vessels currently engaging the enemy. What had initially appeared to be random losses now revealed themselves as carefully orchestrated demonstrations. "You've been deliberately sacrificing ships?" War Prime Catherine's voice carried a mixture of horror and admiration. "We've been investing in intelligence," David corrected. "Every destroyed vessel carried sensors designed to record enemy adaptation patterns. Every engagement provided data about their learning algorithms. We've spent the past month teaching them to counter weapons and tactics we never intended to rely on." The chamber's main display shifted to show the current battle situation. Human forces that had appeared to be in steady retreat were suddenly advancing, their formations moving with precision that seemed almost choreographed. Ships that should have been vulnerable to the entity's adapted defenses were cutting through enemy lines with impossible efficiency. "What changed?" demanded Chancellor Vrax. "We switched to the real fleet," David explained. "The vessels you've been watching were never intended for primary combat. They were teaching tools, designed to show the enemy exactly what we wanted them to learn." The displays zoomed in on individual human ships now dominating the battlefield. These vessels were larger, faster, and operated on technological principles that made the chamber's most advanced AI systems overload trying to analyze them. They moved through space like predators that had been waiting patiently for their prey to reveal every weakness. "Impossible," breathed Science Director Yalith. "The energy requirements alone should exceed anything a single-star civilization could generate." "You're thinking about energy production the way peaceful species think about it," David said. "Humanity never had the luxury of peaceful development. We've spent centuries learning to extract maximum output from minimal resources because our survival depended on it." The battle displays showed something that would haunt galactic military analysts for generations. The entities that had consumed entire civilizations were not just being defeated, they were being systematically dismantled. Human weapons that operated on principles beyond current understanding were taking apart machines that had seemed invincible. "But the cost," War Prime Catherine protested. "This level of military development must have consumed your entire civilization's resources." "It did," David agreed. "For the past 50 years, every human colony, every research station, every industrial facility has existed for one purpose: preparing for this war. We've had no art, no culture, no luxury. Everything we are has been focused on becoming something that could fight what's coming. The implications of his words settled over the chamber like a physical weight. Humanity hadn't just developed superior weapons, they had transformed their entire species into a military force. While galactic civilizations pursued knowledge, beauty, and peaceful expansion, humans had pursued victory at any cost. "The entities are retreating," announced War Prime Kethrin. His voice filled with disbelief. The displays confirmed his observation. The machines that had swept through galactic defenses like they were made of paper were now fleeing from human forces. Their retreat wasn't chaotic but calculated, suggesting they had learned something that terrified even post-biological intelligences. "Will they return?" Chancellor Vrax asked. David checked his chronometer with the casual air of someone following a predetermined schedule. "In approximately 6 months, with everything they've learned about our current capabilities. Then this victory is meaningless." Science Director Yalith pulsed with defeated colors. "This victory is educational," David corrected. "For them and for you. They've now learned that humanity can defeat their current forms. You've learned that we're the only force in the galaxy capable of defending against them." He gestured toward the displays showing human ships beginning to establish defensive positions throughout galactic space. "The question now is whether you'll cooperate with your protectors or continue to pretend you have other options." The assembled aliens stared at the impossible sight of human vessels taking control of strategic positions throughout their territory. They were being conquered, but by the only force capable of keeping them alive. The age of human dominance had begun, not through aggression, but through competence in the face of extinction. The private conference chamber adjacent to the main council hall had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. High Chancellor Vrax sat across from Ambassador David Kane at a simple table. The elaborate ceremonies and public posturing stripped away to reveal the naked reality of their situation. "Show me," Vrax said simply. David activated a holographic projector that filled the air between them with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this wasn't the familiar political map the Council used for territorial discussions. This was something else entirely. A strategic overview that showed every star system, every trade route, every defensive position from a perspective that no galactic civilization had ever possessed. "This is how humanity sees the galaxy," David explained. "Not as a collection of sovereign territories, but as a single defensive zone." Vrax studied the display with growing unease. Human positions were marked throughout galactic space, not just in the border regions where their presence had been detected. They were everywhere. Hidden bases in asteroid fields, monitoring stations in dead systems, supply depots in regions that were supposed to be empty space. "How long?" Vrax asked. 73 years, David replied. "Since the moment we achieved faster-than-light travel and discovered we weren't alone. Every human exploration vessel that left Earth carried 2 missions: public contact and covert intelligence gathering." The Chancellor's multiple eyes focused on clusters of human positions deep within what should have been secure galactic space. "You've been spying on every civilization in the galaxy." "We've been preparing," David corrected. Humanity made contact with galactic civilization and immediately realized 2 things. First, that we were considered primitive and irrelevant. Second, that this made us invisible to potential threats. The display zoomed in on specific regions, showing the true extent of human infiltration. They hadn't just been watching, they had been building. Industrial facilities disguised as mining operations. Research stations masquerading as survey outposts. Weapons platforms hidden within what appeared to be commercial infrastructure. "The defensive grid you've been installing," Vrax observed, his voice heavy with realization. "It's not new construction. We've been building it for decades," David confirmed. "Every human colony, every trade mission, every diplomatic contact has been cover for expanding our defensive network. While you've been debating trade agreements, we've been preparing for war." The hologram shifted to show production statistics that made Vrax's arms tremble. Human industrial output wasn't just impressive for a single-star civilization. It exceeded the combined manufacturing capacity of most galactic sectors, but the resources required for such production should have been impossible to obtain without detection. "The asteroid mining rights your corporations purchased," Vrax said slowly. "The salvage operations and dead systems. Every ton of rare metals, every energy source, every strategic resource we could legally acquire. David nodded. And quite a few we acquired through other means. Humanity has been strip mining everything we could reach for 3 generations. For what purpose? Vrax demanded. You couldn't have known about the entities 70 years ago. David's expression became grimmer. We didn't know about them specifically, but we knew something like them was inevitable. How could you possibly know that? Because that's how the universe works, David said with the certainty of someone stating a mathematical law. In any sufficiently large system, something will eventually evolve that consumes everything else. It's not a question of if, but when. Humanity has always assumed that when would be now. The holographic display changed again, showing human fleet positions throughout galactic space. But these weren't the ships that had engaged the entities at the rim. These were different vessels, larger and more numerous, positioned to defend every major population center in the galaxy. How many ships? Vrax asked in a whisper. 47,000 combat vessels, David replied matter-of-factly, plus support craft, logistics ships, and mobile construction platforms. The 18 ships you observed at the rim were our advanced scouts. The number hung in the air like a physical blow. The entire Galactic Council's combined military forces numbered barely 3,000 ships, most of them designed for policing and ceremonial functions rather than actual warfare. The resources required for such a fleet, Vrax protested. Where did you obtain them? We built them, David said simply. Humanity doesn't purchase its military equipment. We manufacture it. Every human colony includes industrial facilities. Every space station includes shipyards. We've turned our entire civilization into a weapons production system. The hologram showed the reality of human space, not the few dozen visible colonies that appeared in galactic records, but hundreds of hidden facilities spread throughout unexplored regions. Each one was a fortress, a factory, and a research station combined into a single defensive position. But the population requirements, Vrax said, struggling to understand the scope of what he was seeing. To maintain such an extensive network would require billions of personnel. 12 billion humans are currently assigned to military and defense operations, David confirmed. Our entire species is organized along military lines. Every human citizen is trained for combat, engineering, or strategic support roles. The Chancellor stared at the human across from him with new understanding. This wasn't just a species that had developed superior weapons. It was a species that had transformed itself into a weapon. While galactic civilizations pursued individual fulfillment and cultural development, humanity had pursued collective survival with single-minded determination. Why are you showing me this? Vrax asked. Because the entities will return, David said. Probably within 6 months, possibly sooner. When they do, they'll bring everything they've learned about our capabilities. The next battle will make the first one look like a training exercise. The holographic display shifted to show projections of the coming conflict. The mathematical models were terrifying in their complexity and scope. Battles that would rage across multiple star systems. Weapons that could sterilize entire planets. Casualties measured in the billions. And you believe humanity can win this war? We believe humanity can survive it, David corrected. Which is more than any other species in this galaxy can say. The projection zoomed out to show the full strategic picture. Human defensive positions formed an intricate web throughout galactic space, each node supporting the others in a pattern that suggested decades of careful planning. It was the work of a species that had been preparing for total war since the moment they realized they weren't alone in the universe. What do you want from the Council? Vrax asked. Cooperation, David said. Every galactic civilization has resources we can use. Population centers to defend. Industrial capacity to conscript. Knowledge bases to exploit. We're not asking you to fight alongside us. We're telling you to get out of our way while we save your lives. And if we refuse? David's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested depths of resolve that Vrax had never encountered before. Then we save whoever we can and mourn the losses afterward. Humanity doesn't require your permission to defend the galaxy. The hologram faded, leaving the two beings sitting in the dim chamber light. Outside, the normal business of galactic civilization continued, representatives debating policies that would become irrelevant when the real war began. How long do we have to decide? Vrax asked. David checked his chronometer. The decision has already been made. Human forces are moving into defensive positions throughout Council space as we speak. You can either coordinate with us or pretend you still have other options. The age of galactic independence was ending. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment. And now that it had arrived, they would not be denied the authority necessary to wage total war. The warning came through every communication channel simultaneously, a single pulse of data that reached every corner of galactic space in the same instant. Emergency broadcasts flooded planetary networks. Military commanders scrambled to battle stations. Civilian populations looked up at skies that had suddenly become threatening. Admiral Lisa Torres stood on the bridge of the human defense ship Prometheus, watching tactical displays that showed the impossible. The entities had returned, but not as the scattered force they had been before. They came as a fleet that dwarfed anything previously seen. Millions of vessels emerging from dimensional gates that tore reality apart at their edges. Enemy count exceeds sensor capability, reported Commander Walsh from the tactical station. Estimated strength between 8 and 12 million vessels. Composition analysis? Torres asked with the calm of someone who had been expecting this exact scenario. They've adapted, Walsh continued, his voice tight with professional concern. Every ship design we encountered 6 months ago has been upgraded. New vessel types show countermeasures for all known human weapons systems. Torres nodded thoughtfully. The entities had learned from their first encounter, just as human strategists had predicted. They had returned stronger, smarter, and prepared for the specific tactics humanity had used against them. It was exactly what any competent military force would do. Signal all human fleets, Torres commanded. Initiate Protocol 7. Throughout galactic space, the order rippled through communication networks that operated on principles beyond current galactic understanding. Hidden bases that had remained dormant for decades suddenly burst into activity. Industrial facilities revealed their true nature as massive weapons platforms. What had appeared to be civilian infrastructure transformed into the most sophisticated military network ever constructed. On the Council monitoring stations, alien observers watched in stunned silence as humanity's true capabilities revealed themselves. The 18 ships that had fought the entities before had been scouts. The 47,000 vessels they had assumed represented humanity's full strength had been patrol craft. The real human fleet was emerging from dimensional storage spaces that shouldn't have been possible to create. Ships the size of asteroids materialized throughout galactic space, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns that made observation equipment overload. These weren't vessels designed for exploration or trade. They were instruments of total war, built by a species that understood conflict at levels no peaceful civilization could comprehend. Fleet strength at full deployment, Commander Walsh announced. 234,000 combat vessels plus support craft. Torres studied the tactical overview with satisfaction. Every human ship was positioned according to battle plans that had been refined for decades. Each vessel knew its role, its backup assignments, and its sacrifice protocols. This wasn't just a military force. It was the culmination of an entire species' dedication to survival. Enemy fleet is advancing on multiple fronts, Walsh reported. They're targeting major population centers simultaneously. Predictable, Torres observed. They assume we'll divide our forces to protect civilian targets. Show them why that assumption is wrong. The human fleet didn't scatter to defend individual worlds. Instead, they moved with coordinated precision toward predetermined intercept points. These positions had been chosen not for their strategic value, but for their tactical advantages. Regions of space where human weapons would operate at maximum efficiency, while enemy capabilities would be constrained. The first battle began at coordinates that would later be known as the Helios engagement. 50,000 human vessels met 200,000 entity ships in a volume of space barely larger than a typical solar system. The conflict that followed redefined the concept of warfare on a galactic scale. Human weapons that had seemed impressive during the first encounter were revealed to have been operating at a fraction of their true capacity. Energy beams that could crack planets apart cut through enemy formations. Kinetic projectiles that moved at significant percentages of light speed turned even the largest entity vessels into expanding clouds of debris. But the entities had adapted too. Their new ship designs incorporated countermeasures for every human tactic observed during the First War. Armor that absorbed energy weapons, shields that deflected kinetic attacks, electronic warfare systems that could jam human communications. Enemy adaptation protocols are working, Walsh reported as the battle raged. They're countering our primary weapon systems. Of course they are, Torres replied calmly. Signal Phase 2 deployment. The human fleet suddenly changed tactics entirely. Ships that had been fighting with energy weapons and kinetic projectiles now deployed something completely different. Weapons that operated on principles the entities had never encountered, because humanity had never used them before. Reality itself became a weapon. Human ships fired gravitational anomalies that created localized black holes. They launched temporal distortion fields that aged enemy vessels into scrap metal in seconds. They deployed quantum uncertainty bombs that made entire enemy formations exist and not exist simultaneously until the probability wave collapsed in humanity's favor. How are they doing this? Came a frantic transmission from Science Director Yalith, monitoring the battle from Council headquarters. These weapons violate fundamental laws of physics. They violate laws of physics as peaceful species understand them, Admiral Torres replied over the open channel. Humanity has never had the luxury of limiting our research to safe applications. The battle at Helios became a rout. Entity vessels that had been designed to counter humanity's known capabilities found themselves facing weapons that operated on principles beyond their understanding. The survivors fled not in organized retreat but in chaotic panic, their adaptation algorithms overloaded by tactical situations they had no framework to process. But Admiral Torres knew this was only the beginning. The entities would learn from this defeat just as they had learned from the first. They would adapt to humanity's reality-warping weapons and return with new countermeasures. The cycle would continue until one side ran out of innovations or resources. Signal all fleet commanders, Torres ordered. Initiate total mobilization protocols. The command activated preparations that humanity had hoped never to use. Deep space installations that had remained hidden for decades revealed themselves as massive shipyards. Civilian populations that had seemed to live normal lives transformed overnight into military production units. Every human colony became a fortress. Every human citizen became a soldier. Admiral, Commander Walsh said quietly, total mobilization will transform our entire civilization into a war machine. There won't be any going back. Torres stared at the tactical displays showing entity forces regrouping throughout galactic space. They had lost this battle, but their numbers remained overwhelming. The next assault would be even more devastating, and the one after that would be worse still. This wasn't a war that humanity could win through superior tactics or advanced weapons. This was a war that would be won through superior dedication to survival. Humanity spent 70 years preparing for this moment, Torres said with finality. We transformed our species into something that could fight what's coming. Now we find out if that was enough. The human fleet began deploying throughout galactic space with mechanical precision, each ship taking position in a defensive network that had been planned down to the last detail. They weren't just fighting to protect galactic civilization anymore. They were fighting to justify 70 years of sacrifice, discipline, and absolute commitment to victory. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to pay whatever price survival demanded. The final battle began not with explosions or energy beams, but with mathematics. Deep in the quantum computers of the human defense ship Prometheus, calculations that had been running for months finally reached their conclusion. Admiral Lisa Torres studied the results with the satisfaction of someone whose longest gamble was about to pay off. Pattern analysis complete, reported Commander Walsh, his voice tight with anticipation. The entity's adaptation algorithm follows predictable parameters. They're learning exactly what we want them to learn. Torres nodded, watching tactical displays that showed entity forces massing for what would clearly be their final assault. Over the past year, they had adapted to every human weapon, countered every human tactic, and evolved beyond every challenge humanity had presented. They believed themselves invincible. They were wrong. Signal all human fleets, Torres commanded. Initiate the Revelation Protocol. Throughout galactic space, human ships that had been fighting with advanced weapons suddenly powered down their systems. Vessels that had seemed to be humanity's most sophisticated creations went dark, drifting like derelicts in the void. To the entities, it appeared that the human fleet had suffered catastrophic system failures at the worst possible moment. The entity fleet advanced with confidence, their adapted hulls and countermeasure systems primed to deal with every form of human resistance they had encountered. They moved to surround and destroy what appeared to be a disabled enemy force. That's when the real human fleet revealed itself. The ships that emerged from dimensional hiding spaces weren't just larger than anything previously seen. They operated on technological principles that made the entity's most advanced adaptations meaningless. These weren't vessels built to fight in space as it was currently understood. They were machines designed to rewrite the fundamental rules that governed reality itself. Fleet status report. Torres requested with calm professionalism. All Omega-class vessels operational. Walsh responded. Reality manipulation systems at full capacity. Causality weapons armed and ready. The Omega-class ships represented humanity's ultimate achievement, vessels that could edit the basic constants of physics within their operational areas. They didn't just carry weapons. They carried the ability to change the laws of nature, to make their weapons impossible to counter. The entity fleet, numbering in the millions, found themselves facing 200 vessels that each possessed the power to redefine existence itself. The disparity in numbers became irrelevant when one side could simply decree that the other side's technology no longer functioned. Entities are attempting to adapt, Walsh reported as the battle commenced. Their systems are trying to counter gravitational constant manipulation. Let them try, Torres replied. Signal the fleet. Demonstrate why adaptation has limits. The human Omega-class ships began their assault not by attacking the entity vessels, but by changing the nature of space around them. Physical laws that had remained constant for billions of years suddenly became variable. The speed of light fluctuated. Gravity reversed direction. Time moved backward in localized regions. Entity ships that had been designed to operate in normal space found themselves trying to function in environments where normal space no longer existed. Their adaptation algorithms, sophisticated as they were, had no framework for dealing with situations where the underlying rules of physics changed from moment to moment. Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking down, Walsh observed with professional satisfaction. They can't adapt to environments that don't follow consistent rules. But Torres wasn't watching the tactical displays anymore. Her attention was focused on communication channels carrying transmissions from every corner of galactic space. The alien civilizations that humanity had been protecting were witnessing something that would reshape their understanding of what was possible. Open channels to all council representatives, Torres ordered. The main display shifted to show High Chancellor Vrax and the assembled alien leadership, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and terror as they watched humanity reshape reality itself to achieve victory. Honored representatives, Torres began, her voice carrying across galactic space with the authority of someone who commanded forces that could edit existence. You are witnessing the conclusion of humanity's 70-year preparation for this war. On the tactical displays, entity vessels were simply ceasing to exist as human reality manipulation made their matter arrangement patterns impossible. Millions of ships that had consumed entire civilizations were being unmade not through destruction, but through mathematical impossibility. For 7 decades, Torres continued, humanity has prepared for threats that our galactic neighbors insisted didn't exist. We have sacrificed our culture, our individual freedoms, and our peaceful development to become something capable of defending against extinction-level forces. The entity fleet was dissolving faster now, their adaptation systems overloaded by conditions that changed too rapidly for any intelligence to follow. The machines that had learned to counter every human weapon found themselves facing weapons that redefined what weapons could be. But this victory comes with a price, Torres added, her voice taking on a grimmer tone. Humanity has become something that no longer fits into the peaceful galactic order you've established. We are now the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Chancellor Vrax found his voice despite the impossibility of what he was witnessing. What does this mean for galactic civilization? Torres checked her chronometer as the last entity vessels vanished from the tactical displays. The threat that had consumed countless worlds and challenged the existence of all galactic life had been eliminated in less than an hour by weapons that treated the laws of physics as suggestions. It means the galaxy now belongs to the species capable of defending it. Torres replied simply, Humanity didn't seek this position, but we've earned it through competence and sacrifice. Every world that continues to exist does so because we chose to protect it. The communication channels filled with voices from hundreds of species, some expressing gratitude, others fear, many simply trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. The universe had changed in fundamental ways, and they were all now living in a reality shaped by human military necessity. "What are your demands?" Chancellor Vrax asked with the resignation of someone who understood that his era of galactic leadership had just ended. "Cooperation," Torres said. "Every species, every world, every resource in this galaxy will now operate under human oversight. Not because we desire conquest, but because we are the only force capable of protecting against the next threat." "What next threat?" Science Director Yelith asked, her energy field pulsing with nervous patterns. Torres smiled with the expression of someone who understood that survival was an ongoing process, not a final achievement. The entities we just defeated were the scouting force for something larger. Our quantum analysis suggests their parent civilization exists in approximately 40% of all parallel universes. They will notice the loss of this force and investigate. The implications settled over the galactic representatives like a physical weight. The war they had just witnessed hadn't been the final battle. It had been a preliminary engagement. "How long?" Vrax whispered. "Conservative estimates suggest 50 years, Torres replied. "Optimistic projections give us 75. Either way, humanity will use that time to prepare for threats that make the entities look primitive." The age of human hegemony was no longer approaching. It had arrived. The galaxy now belonged to the species that had spent 70 years becoming strong enough to keep it alive. As the communication channels closed and the human fleet began establishing permanent positions throughout galactic space, one truth became undeniable. Survival belonged to those who prepared for it properly. Humanity had prepared very well indeed.